Hey everybody, good morning. Happy Monday on this lovely holiday weekend. Happy Labor Day. For those of you who maybe have to work this weekend or on this holiday day, I'm so sorry, but hopefully some astrology will make you feel that much better. We are here for the Astro-Babble, which I do on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays every morning on those days at 10:30. If you would like to be in the queue and have your chart featured on the Astro-Babble, all you need to do is private message me or email me your birth date, birthplace, and exact birth time. I do need those three details in order to run an accurate chart. If you would like to work with me one-on-one, or if you would like to learn astrology, you can always head to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, and we'll get you started. But yeah, we're going to be dissecting 5 charts this morning. We're going to be talking about them, charts that you, the viewers, have sent in to me, and we'll discuss astrology stuff and fun stuff and life stuff and not so fun stuff because life is not always fun and that kind of range of activities. So go ahead and grab a beverage of choice and we'll go ahead and we'll unpack our first chart. So our first chart has been donated to us by One Trip Beyond on Facebook. Good, or on Instagram. Sorry, it's a very Instagram heavy day for me today with 4 out of our 5 charts actually coming from Instagram. So cheers to Instagram. If you're not following me on Insta, it's just at Scorpio Rising Astrology. Yeah. So let's take a peek at your chart, my dear. So we've got a Capricorn ascendant at 7 degrees. Ooh, and then we've got Sun and Moon in Cancer, as well as Mercury in between those in Cancer in the 7th house in direct opposition. That's tricky. Ruler of the chart is going to be Saturn in Gemini in the 6th house of work. So whenever we have the ruler of the chart in the 6th house, wherever the ruler of the chart is placed, which is the planet that rules your ascendant, right? So if you don't know your ascendant, if you don't know your rising, you need that information to determine a lot about somebody's chart. Yeah, because everybody knows their sun sign. But when we look at the moon sign and especially the ascendant gives us a lot more information than the sun or the moon ever could in terms of somebody's baseline personal preferences. And having the ruler, like we have in this chart, in the 6th house of work, health, pets, means that this person is going to be very, very focused, hyper-focused even, on those topics of potentially being a workaholic, very much an animal lover, and also in the health and wellness field, and or constantly dealing with health struggles as a theme in the life. What makes this Lord of the chart even more interesting is One Trip Beyond is the chart that we're looking. Yep, Scorpio ascendant over here. Love you. But in this chart, we have Capricorn rising, so Saturn is Lord of the chart at 0 degrees in Gemini in the 6th house of work. This Saturn is extremely closely opposing retrograde Neptune and Sagittarius in the 12th, which brings a little bit of my medical astrologer forward, just a little bit, because medical astrology is something that I specialize in, and the 6th house is a health house. It's the major house that we look to for the first round of disease. So although the first house is the house of the body and it tells us what body system is the most sensitive and prone to symptoms, the 6th house is what happens when you ignore your body, right? And to have the ruler of the chart here really indicates that the bones, the teeth, the joints of Capricorn, but also the Gemini body systems, the arms, the hands, the nervous system, the lungs, yeah, are all going to be slightly underdeveloped, a little bit too crippled by that Saturn placement. And we have the Neptune opposition. The Neptune opposition in the 12th house of hospitalizations does give me a red flag, because whenever I see Neptune involved in a medical aspect, there's always going to be this unknown medically. Traditionally, I've seen it in people who have undergone multiple rounds of misdiagnosis before they actually find out what's actually wrong with them. Could be random immune issues that are actually emotionally based and are not rooted in the physical body. But it could also be like weird food sensitivities that they didn't know that they had. But because Neptune tends to get all up in the health and wellness business when it comes to confusion, unpredictability, and random acute stuff that isn't actually by definition connected to symptoms. We just need to be aware that there are some very severe medical transits in the chart and that health should not be taken lightly. And also, always get a second opinion when it comes to diagnostics for your particular chart. Okay. But I think we need to talk about this little pileup of planets. Not exactly a stellium, because we'd really want 4 planets for that. But 3 planets in Cancer in a house is pretty. It's pretty much a lot to deal with. So let's unpack that, shall we? So we have the Sun in Cancer at 1 degree, Mercury in Cancer at 5 degrees, and then the Moon in Cancer at 15. So this is technically still a new moon placement. The moon is very, very small in the sky at this point, barely a sliver. She can barely be seen. And when we look at the moon's placement in a chart, we often look at, depending on the phase of the moon, how emotionally open somebody is, or how much of an introvert they are. Yeah, and new moon placements, I speak from personal experience because actually, my dear, I am also a new moon in Cancer. Have that in my chart. We tend to be very emotionally reclusive because the moon, in her fullness, who represents our emotional space, is literally hidden, yeah, within the skies. As well as the moon in Cancer being a placement that tends to be hyper emotional, it from my personal experience, one piece of advice that I can offer you with this placement is you have a tendency to hide your emotions, right? Not necessarily a big thing, like a lot of people hide what they're feeling, but you tend to hide what you feel so well that you forget that you're feeling it, right? Which is tricky because you also have to battle hyper empathy, having 2 very important personality placement markers, the sun and the moon, both in the very sensitive and nurturing sign of Cancer. You know, it's somebody who reaches out for somebody's emotions first, and frankly, they might not understand what they're feeling. You might not understand what you're feeling about them and confusing that with what they're feeling. Like, it's a very nuanced aspect to have a new moon in Cancer in the chart, especially in the 7th house of relationships, my dear, especially in the 7th house of relationships, which means that you also tend to be attracted to partners who hide their emotions, and people who often are very, when we look at Cancer placements in the 7th house, like, it speaks to you and your personal qualities because they're your sun, your moon, but also those planetary qualities are transferred to your relationships and what you view as important in a mate because they're present within the 7th house. And that also kind of makes it difficult because you're hiding your emotions and they're hiding their emotions. So what do you have to talk about? Like, you both like to give and neither one of you really like to receive. So how do you navigate that? And that's just something to be aware of. It's a placement that you'll constantly be kind of chewing on for the rest of your life, and there is no right or wrong answer to it, but it's just learning how to be a little bit more emotionally intelligent because your chart kind of demands that of you. Yeah. Yes, Amy, medical astrology is totally a thing. Yeah, it's one of my favorite branches of astrology, because I come from a health background. Because the Lord of my chart is also in the 6th house, so one trip beyond, you and I are very similar in our chart dynamics, although very very different in others. Uh, let's see. One of the other things about your chart that I find interesting is that you're here also very much to learn the game of money. Um, you have the North Node here in Aquarius, co-present with Mars in Aquarius being ruled by your Saturn from the 6th. So the idea of you showing up to work, showing up to a job, earning a paycheck, you then learning what to do with that paycheck, learning what your value is, both as an employee, as somebody who provides a service, but also for somebody who is just here to learn the world of cash flow. Um, and I think that that's just something that's really really fun. Be careful though, because Mars in the 2nd house does tend to amp up spending. I find it does tend to, especially on quirky shit like with Aquarius. You don't need to make that 230 purchase on Amazon. You just don't. You don't need to buy that weird coat to complete your aesthetic. Like, you just don't. So I think that being aware of monetary stuff, definitely something to just take into consideration. And then, no. Yeah, there are good success markers in the chart. I like it. One final point that I want, no, I'm not supposed to talk about that. Okay, so I think the chart is done for now. Is that it? No, we need to talk about the 11th house. So the 11th house is the house of friendships in your chart, which you have the MC, the midheaven, the highest point of the sky at the time of your birth, in Scorpio, in the 11th house of friendships, which means another major theme in your life is going to be the acquisition and the understanding of friendships and companions. You also have Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde here, so you tend to be a fan of people who are very actively promoting their secrecy. And the archetype that I see for this, especially with Scorpio being very, very present, is the overly gothic archetype. Somebody who is so blatantly different and occult and hidden, but they market it, they show it, they parade it around town, because Scorpio is that secretive sign, and you have Jupiter in retrograde, but Jupiter is still very much the gas giant. It's the biggest planet in our seven schemes besides the sun. We have this massive weight to Jupiter that I think is really important for us to consider here. So like, it's just an interesting friendship choice, but once you understand that those are truly your allies, and it's just a unique kind of piece of the chart of who you are. But we do have Mars in Aquarius, uh, applying to make a square to that and ruling it at the same time. So I think one of the things that you need to also be aware of is the financial dynamic of your friendships, right? Just because they can't pay for a meal, yeah, it doesn't mean that they don't appreciate your friendship. But likewise, just because you pay for their meal doesn't mean that you're better friends. Yeah, tough lessons there. So anyway, that's it. That's the final thing that I wanted to talk about. Thank you, One Trip Beyond, for sharing your chart, and allowing us to dissect you for science. Good morning, Anita, on Facebook. Good morning, everybody who's tuning on. I'm seeing bits and pieces of the chats. So second chart of our morning is going to be Bex. Morning, Bex. I appreciate you submitting your chart. Cheers. 1 degree Cancer ascendant. Oh, I'm a fan already. I'm a fan, but I wish that ascendant was treated better. That ascendant is making a square to your moon in Libra, my dear. Down in the 4th house of family. Tricky. Tricky family dynamic for a couple reasons. One, we have the ruler of the chart, the lord of the chart here, because you have Cancer ascendant. The moon is the lord of your chart, the most important planet, which represents you as the native. And that moon is in the 4th house of family, which means that family is very, very important to you. Your home is also very, very important to you. Places where you really find your heart, your soul, the essence of your being. However, that moon in Libra is making a pretty sharp square to the ascendant. And when that happens, there's often personality conflicts within the family dynamic. And I know families aren't perfect, and I know when I say personality conflicts in the family dynamic, a lot of people are like, they could easily roll their eyes and say, well, that's some pretty general astrology. But when I say it to you, it makes a little bit more sense than most, because this really, really deep embedded sense of conflict, but also belonging in the family unit is unique to your chart. We also have Neptune at 29 degrees in the 4th house. And I think that one of the... Okay, so we're going to get just a little bit nuanced for 2 seconds. Neptune, as I said before in the last chart, tends to bring confusion, and muddying of details, which was definitely present in terms of like keeping secrets and being evasive and avoiding of the topics at hand. But one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention as far as the family dynamic goes is what frustrated you most about that process was that they were always on the edge of telling the truth. They were always on the edge of owning the situation. They were always on the edge of recovery. But they never fucking did it. Right? So it's one of those things where in your chart, like the conflict goes so much deeper and so much more profound than just normal kind of personality stuff. Like you constantly would get your hopes up and you're like, oh, they they did it again. Well, maybe next time. And it that Neptune trapped at 29 degrees, like there will like they're so close but no cigar. And I think that that's kind of an important thing to understand is when you give somebody more than a certain acceptable amount of chances and they don't prove to you that they're willing to be in your life for all the right reasons, then that's definitely something to break away from and consider with several grains of salt. Okay. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about? Mm, where are we going? Talk to me, chart. So we've got the Sun in Sagittarius at 15, Mercury at 16 in Sag, North Node at 21 in Sag in the sixth house of work. But I'm not necessarily a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it for this reason. So in traditional astrology, there's an idea called combustion. And combustion is when planets are too close to the sun. Yeah. For instance, your North Node and your Mercury, because they are within 7.5 degrees on either side of the sun, they are known as combust or via combusta, which is an afflicting placement. It means that the sun outshines those planets and takes away their virtue. So although you're here to learn how to basically hold down a stable job, because of that North Node in the sixth, you're also here to learn about pets and you're also here to learn about health stuff, right? But specifically from a work perspective, I think it's important because you've put the sun in Sag here, and the sun in Sag is this very bouncy, trouncy, flouncy, pouncy, fun, like very Tiggerish energy, which I love. But when it's eclipsing other important aspects in a very detail-oriented house of work, I think that there's a problem here where the ego starts to invade. And the ego starts to say, well, this is about me. It's not about the task that I'm doing. And that is incorrect with the sixth house dynamic. The sixth house prefers you to be of service to others. Very much the idea of a loyal pet, right? Also, kind of somebody who sits behind a desk and works for a bigger company, or somebody who's behind the scenes doing the work for the front person, which would be embodied by the 10th house of success. But your ego really kind of takes these everyday working opportunities as the sign of like, no, I have to strut my stuff. No, I have to be known. No, I have to be recognized. And that can sometimes conflict with a lot of the lessons behind what you're actually there to learn. So something to keep in mind and to be aware of when it comes to your sixth house of work. Let's see. Oh, just as a side note, your birth time is 5:30 p.m. If for some reason you are not absolutely sure of that birth time because you have a 1 degree ascendant, we need to be kind of aware of that. So if what I'm saying is not necessarily making sense, we may have the wrong birth time. Let's see, what else? What else? We do have Uranus and Leo retrograde in a second. That brings about some financial issues, which will be easier to tackle later in life, but definitely harder to understand the value of money, especially because you tie it so heavily to the ego. You view money as a affirmation to your sense of self. If I earn money, if I have money, then I am a good person and I have worth and value. That is not the case. That is not the case. Some of the richest people are the biggest pieces of shit, and some of the poorest people are the most genuine, kind people you will ever meet. So I think that that needs to be understood. And I also think you need to understand that when you kind of flip flop the other way and you're like, screw the system, money is a construct, that is also dangerous, right? So we need to respect financial resources a little bit more in your chart instead of treating them as 100% the make or break of personality or 100% the bane of society. You have all the makings of a very prolific writer. Jupiter in Virgo in the third house of writing, teaching, communication blesses that house with a little bit of extra abundance. Also in your fifth house of creativity, you have Mars in Scorpio ruling the 10th house of success. So I think that is also a really, really fun kind of avenue. If you haven't considered creative writing or ghostwriting, I think that would be excellent. But then also Mars and Scorpio in the fifth house, co-present with Saturn and Scorpio, both malefics in the fifth house. We have some stuff to unpack here when it comes to children, when it comes to your own sexuality, and when it comes to creativity as well as parenting. Mars and Scorpio is in dignity. He's in his own sign. But Saturn co-present with Mars, they are both known as very dry planetary energies and can suck the life force out of a space if they so choose. So you may find issues with sex drive, you may find issues with children in general, or your need to foster children, but also your simultaneous dislike of them. I've seen that in clients who have that appropriately placed Mars in Scorpio, but then Saturn, the greater malefic, in the same house. It's like, I really, really want kids, but I hate them. You know, that kind of dynamic. So we might need to unpack some parenting, children, creativity, sexuality stuff in that house for sure. Nope, that's it. That's all the chart has to say. So thank you, Bex. I appreciate you donating your charts. This chart has been absolutely wonderful to read. Always a fan of my Insta peeps coming forward with charts. Okay. Third chart is Jennifer. Jennifer, we've got some Gemini stuff. Gemini, Jennifer, Super Gemini. Super Gemini. Ooh, goodness. Oh, and the moon in Aquarius. All of this air energy from Jennifer. Goodness. However will I process it all? Intellectually, of course, says Gemini. So we have an interesting pileup in the first house of self. So when there's a large cluster of planetary formations in the first house, this often tells us that there are a lot of personal dynamics at play. But those personal dynamics are being given up for relationship stuff. So fascinating. Okay, anyway, sorry, getting distracted. I don't look at these charts beforehand, so sometimes it's just bing, 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 trying to figure out where to start. So we have the ascendant in Gemini, which makes you naturally Gemini. Yeah, gives you a little bit of the stronger intellect, a lot more of the curiosity, a little bit more of that bipolar tendency to go from one end of the mental emotional spectrum to the other, but always in a very creative way. However, you also have your sun in Gemini, giving you 2 bonus points for Gemini energy. And then not only that, but you also have Mercury, the ruler of your chart, in Gemini in the first house. So we could think of you as like a triple Gemini. Although Mercury is retrograde, we do have a little bit too much of that kind of zany air energy coming through at times. Miscommunications and people looking at you like you have 3 heads because your words seem just backwards to them is something that you just need to kind of be aware of, especially when it comes to family. because the way that you think and the way that they think is very, very different. There is also the South Node here, though. So when it comes to this formation in the chart, one of the things that I talk with clients about a lot who have similar formations like this is you've put such a strong stamp of who you are in regards to Gemini's essence on your spirit, right? But you've also put the South Node here. And because Gemini is already very adaptable, very mutable, yeah, it doesn't really take a shape. It really conforms to the people, the places, the things, the interests that are at the present moment. The South Node kind of exacerbates that. It can make you feel overly empathetic, like you could collapse into a pile of goo or a puff of smoke at any minute, because the personality is just not as strong. Yeah. You have a lot of very innate characteristics when it comes to Gemini, but that South Node being present really does kind of suck the personality out of you and can make you think like, well, who exactly am I? I seem to just become the nearest person or the nearest thing or the latest TV show I watch. You know, I adopt those personalities. Do I have a personality of my own? Your personality is adaptive, right? And that is a trait in and of itself, and a lot of people fail to realize that. Okay, so that's one part. Second part is you're here to learn about relationships, right? And there's no better quality in relationships than learning how to adapt, learning how to mirror, learning how to be in somebody else's shoes. Yeah, the North Node in Sagittarius in the 7th house of relationships really does tell us that you're here to discover what it means to be a partner. Yeah, and to have somebody in your life that is with you and kind of is that that stake that really helps to keep you upright energetically. But then we have Jupiter and Leo ruling the 7th house of relationships. It wouldn't surprise me if you marry a total showboater. You know, somebody who's very big, very boisterous, very dramatic. The drama of your partner, and that you're naturally attracted to is absolutely fascinating. But again, like the big personality that you envy, you tend to want to covet. So that's kind of the method behind the madness of why you choose that particular placement. Then we have the moon in Aquarius. Moon in Aquarius up in the 9th. You know, this is where you get a lot of your spiritual curiosity. This is where you get a lot of your love for learning. This is where you get a lot of your love of travel. Yeah, your need to explore other places. You know, everybody thinks that Gemini is just flighty, but one of the things that they try to do as a mutable sign is find themselves through the experiences of others. And especially when it comes to travel in the 9th house, you know, it's one of those things where you're not just looking to meet other people, you're looking to literally stand in new places and feel the energy of that place and absorb the culture of those places and those people and the food and, you know, everything that the 9th house would represent in terms of being worldly. You're trying to cultivate within yourself, which is helpful for your personality type. It really does provide nice contrast. Are we done? Are we done? Last kind of note before we wrap up. When it comes to how you earn your money. So from an astrological perspective, there are 3 houses that talk about career stuff, but not all of them relate to work. We have the 10th house of success, the 6th house of work, and then the 2nd house of finance. So the chart really differentiates, hey, this is what you'll be known for, this is what you'll do for a living, and this is how you'll earn your living, right? And the 3 of those are separate, which can make for a really interesting dynamic. So you have Venus and Cancer in the 2nd house. I really enjoy Cancer in the 2nd house because what people sleep on Cancer about is its sign energy really does allow you to cultivate that hermit crab tendency of hoarding wherever you are. and to be in the second house hoarding resources, like you're never without that tin underneath your bed of hidden cash. Like it's a thing that we do when Cancer energy is prevalent in the chart. And to have Venus in Cancer, a goddess who's known for abundance in that sign, is just really, really lovely. But I would like to remind you that the moon in the ninth house of travel is ruling your second house of finance. So I would really encourage you to, if you have the opportunity to work in scholastic settings, preferably at the college level or above, if you have the ability to work in spiritual fields, or if you have the ability to travel or work internationally with foreigners, I would highly, highly take up those offers, because that would unlock a lot of the earning potential of your chart financially. Okay, cool. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you donating your chart. It has been a pleasure. Good morning, Aliana. Good morning, Emily. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody jumping on. Okay, we are on chart number 4. Chart number 4. Chart number 4 is Lisa. Cheers. Good morning, Lisa. How are you? We have very interesting dynamics in the chart, Lisa. Very interesting dynamics. Oh, the fire. The fire, the charisma, the uniqueness, the talent. Oh, I'm gagging. And an exalted Venus and Taurus in the 10th. Lisa, dearest, look at you. Just cracking away. Crack-a-lackin'. Oh, that Venus. That Venus has some family trauma, though. That Venus has some family trauma. Ooh. Ooh, and a dead Mercury in the 8th. Ooh, goodness. Oh, we've got such a fun house to unpack in your chart, Lisa. So let's talk with the ascendant. So the ascendant gives you a Leonian flare, a fiery flare, a dramatic flare, a fixed fire flare to the personality. But you also have your sun in a fire sign of Aries. So we have this double heat that comes forward in the chart. Now, your sun is located in the 9th house, and we just got done talking about the 9th house. It's the house of travel, foreigners, higher education, and spirituality. Those topics are very, very important to you, extremely important. But not only are they super important, you're also very, very good at them. Why? Because you have your sun in its favorite sign of Aries, what we would call the sign of its exaltation. It is at 0 degrees, so it's right on that cusp, but it has transitioned into the sign. So we do have more Aries energy than we do Pisces at this point. But another thing that I find super fascinating about your chart is you also have Mars in Aries, the ruler of Aries, ruling your sun in the 9th house. If you are not in a career where you get to travel, if you are not in a career that involves some form of international work, if you're not in a career that has some sort of spiritual meaning or constantly fuels your learning process, get out, because you will get so bored so fast. I guarantee it. So yeah, it's just such power in those house dynamics right now. But unfortunately, there's a lot of heavy transits hitting your 9th house of travel right now via your 6th house of work. Would not surprise me if the company that you worked for shut down. Would not surprise me if we had lots of maybe even firing or reorganization, or you're in between jobs right now, because all of this Capricorn nonsense that's happening in the skies with Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto all retrograde in Capricorn is hitting your 6th house of work and squaring or strangling all of that really precious exalted energy in your 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. So there's just a lock on one of the most powerful aspects of your chart right now. And unfortunately, it's not really a great time for anybody to move forward, but you specifically, from a career perspective, it's really strangling a lot of those placements for you. So be patient. It will all be over on December 19th. When Jupiter and Saturn specifically conjoin in Aquarius in your 7th house of relationships. So there's going to be really fun relationship stuff happening right after all of that nonsense clears up with the work. And yeah, so that's that. Where do we go from here? So let's talk about children, because we have some complications here with children. So we have Jupiter and Sagittarius in the fifth house of children, as well as creativity, sexuality, parenting. Jupiter in Sagittarius is arguably one of the luckiest placements that we could have. So why do I say that there's trouble in this space? Well, it's because of what's surrounding that Jupiter. We have Uranus, who is retrograde in Sag in the fifth house. Uranus is the planet of unpredictability. Neptune is also here at 29 degrees, who we talked about in the first and second charts earlier this morning. Neptune is a planet that's known for confusion, ambiguity, illusion. Yeah. And then also that Neptune is conjoining the South Node. The South Node is the energy suck of the chart. It's where we lose a lot of our energy, and it's where we tend to find we are moving away from, as opposed to the North Node, which we move towards. So we'll talk about that in a second. And I think that if you were to choose pregnancy as a life experience that you would like to have at this time, we just need to be very patient. We need to understand that the body may be ready, but the spirit may not be willing. You also may have, because the South Node is here, certain schools of astrology might say you have past life trauma regarding children and pregnancy, and your creative energies in general. So that's just an area of life that we might need to remediate. We might need to unpack a little bit. We might need to work with those energies a little bit more closely to really help them express themselves through the chart. But I do enjoy that you've counterbalanced quite nicely with the moon in Gemini, North Node in Gemini, in the 11th house of friendships, tribes, and communities. So what I like about this placement is you've put your moon here, which is a major personality marker, and you've put it very, very close to applying to the South Node, or the North Node, rather. The North Node is the part of the chart where we find our life's purpose, but not necessarily the one thing that we do for the rest of our lives, like work stuff. It's life's purpose in regards to what we're growing towards, who we're growing into being. Yeah. And you're growing into this very community oriented, tribe oriented person who's really able to ignite philanthropic efforts through a united community front. Right? And with the issues in the fifth house of children, it wouldn't surprise me if the remedy for that would be to understand that, hey, like you can be a mother or a parent in a way that is not biologically traditional, right? And still fulfill those chart placements and those chart requirements. And I think that it's easier for you, more so than most, because we have this Venus and Taurus in the 10th house of success, which, again, by the way, just geeking out, love to see Venus in her domicile in the 10th, because it really just gives you this goddess energy in the chart. It really just allows you to claim that Earth Mother archetype, but that Venus is opposed by Saturn in Scorpio in the 4th house. So I think a lot of this does have to do with ancestral or family trauma in regards to holding you back from who you are becoming. And I think that's one of the reasons why you run. I think that's one of the reasons why you travel. I think that's one of the reasons why you're so focused on growth, is because you come from this background where options are very limited and people and places and things are very restrictive. So if you break through those bonds by treating those planets, those people, those beings with respect, but also choosing your own life path, I think that's kind of where your chart is taking you, to spread your wings, to become a little bit more grounded, a little bit more rooted, a little bit more stable, and healing the aspects of your chart that are not so graceful. Cool. So thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you donating your chart very much. We have one final chart to go over. That chart belongs to Lydia. Lydia, my dear, how are you? Cheers. Let's take a peek. Ascendant in Sagittarius, North Node in Sagittarius. So We have an ascendant in Sagittarius, which gives you this really kind of spunky, fiery energy to your chart. Also makes you a little bit more flexible, which I think is a nice complement to your sun in Taurus in the sixth. It really does mean that, like, yes, you understand the value of a hard day's work. Yes, you understand the need for routine, for habit, for doing things on a schedule, for respecting people's boundaries and timelines. But then you have this really nice Sagittarius energy, which comes in and just says, hey, fun. Hey, let's do things some random way that we haven't done it before and see if we can't break through into a new solution. So I like that. I like that combo for sure. We also have the North Node in Sagittarius in the first, so I think it's going to be a recurring theme that the fun side of you is going to need to be developed more so than the other sides. And the more you start to lean into that kind of, not necessarily class clown energy, because that's demeaning to Sagittarius, but it is kind of the jovial fool type archetype that's kind of in the town square, making friends with people, being a little bit more flamboyant, a little bit more talkative, but building connections and building a life through that spark that naturally belongs to Sagittarius. But we do have this really heavy, kind of stubborn side to you, which is Sun in Taurus, Mercury in Taurus in the sixth house of work, health, pets. So I know how much you love to play by the rules, but you simultaneously break the rules like it's a thing. You're going to need to learn how to balance that throughout the life. I get it. Money is going to be a little bit difficult for a couple different reasons. Although you will earn some really great money through the third house of writing, teaching, communication, I would highly, highly leverage those strengths. Especially if you were to write, like copywriting would be great for you. Writing work ethic manuals, policies and procedures, even working in the legal field, like you would do very well when it comes to writing, teaching, speaking, communication, but specifically using those avenues of what is written in order to make money. That could also involve law stuff because the sun from the sixth is ruling the ninth house of law. Okay. And you also have Saturn and Aquarius here in the third, which I think is a beautiful placement for editing. It's a beautiful placement for being a stickler to the way that things are written, the words that are chosen, and also learning how to creatively interpret those words, for sure. But money as a whole, not necessarily a super great topic for you. We do have Neptune and Uranus, both retrograde in Capricorn in the second house of finance. So we would need to remediate that by seeking out an accountant and really making sure that you're not left to your own devices financially, because your understanding of those themes tends to be a little bit lacking. We have a difficult placement that I'd like to talk to you about because we have Venus in Aries and the moon in Aries in the fifth house of children, creativity, sexuality, and parenting. I'm not a fan of these placements for a couple reasons. One, Venus is in her fall. She doesn't like to be in Aries. Also, the moon is in her fall. She's squaring her natural sign of Capricorn. So when it, or her natural sign of Cancer, rather. So when we have these planets which are traditionally known to be compassionate, when we have these planets that are traditionally known to be reflective and cooling and healing by nature, and you put them in the fiery, aggressive sign of Aries in the fifth house of children, it really gives you this prove it to me energy when it comes to raising children, which can be a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too expectation oriented, a little bit too domineering. Definitely leadership qualities, but leadership qualities that tend to go sour rather fast, especially because you do tend to use the rules to your favor. The expectation of reaching those rules can sometimes feel like an insurmountable task to children and your parenting style, should you choose to activate that part of your chart. So yeah, we might need to remediate that moon, remediate that Venus, get a little bit more softness into the chart. And I think that's really what, back to the ascendant in Sagittarius, that flexibility, I think that type of flexibility is what your chart is really asking you to cultivate this go around, Lydia, is, you have these very strong fixed earth, air placements where you know how to play by the rules already. You know how to stand your ground, but standing your ground can sometimes be a detriment to those you want to partner with, right? And so the Venus Moon situation in your fifth house of children, when children are asked to do things that they don't understand, and you think that creating a wall of emotional force for them to climb is going to help them understand that, like, that can sometimes, depending on their chart dynamics, some children might succeed at that, others will inevitably fail. That can sometimes be a really harsh realization to bring into a delicate house by nature. Yeah. So learning some flexibility, learning a little bit more kindness, not just kindness to other people, but kindness to yourself. Yeah. Giving yourself a little bit more slack is really the theme of the charts that I'd like to unpack, because there's so much that is certain, but you're asking yourself to learn how to flow through uncertainty this time around. And I think that can be both a fun dynamic, but also a dynamic that requires a little bit more oil, a little bit more grease, as the wheels do turn and squeak and knock off their rusted, stagnant placements. Okay, cool. Thank you, Lydia. I appreciate you donating your charts to the live stream. Hi, Fran. And that is pretty much it, everybody. We have wrapped up another round of the Astro-Babble. Thank you so much for watching live as well as the recording. I do these every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10:30 on Facebook and Instagram. If you would like to submit your birth chart information for the queue, I just need your birth date, birthplace, and exact birth time. Private message me your details. Do not publicly post that information for security. Also, if you would like to work one-on-one, if you would like a consult, or if you would like to learn astrology, you can always go to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, and we can set something up. But until next time, have a fantastic rest of your holiday weekend, and may the stars be ever in your favor.